Now, Tucker Carlson is a conservative, actually, I would say now populist commentator, was on Fox News and now is his own entity on X. And he recently came out and said this: Ukraine is at war with Christianity. Also, Ukraine has embraced transgenderism. Okay. Anybody can say anything, but you have to be able to prove what you're saying. And what he's saying is just, it's fairly nonsensical. Now, Tucker has been consistent about his opposition to Ukraine, his support for Russia, saying that he wants Russia to win or wants Ukraine to lose. And he's just had this jaded view of Ukraine as the devil and Russia somehow as clean and wholesome and traditional. And it doesn't seem like that's actually the case. Before I go on to the next one, here's Michael McFaul saying, come on, Tucker, the vast majority of Ukrainians are Christians too. Putin started a war to kill Christians. That's undeniably so. Both of those statements are undeniably true. Now, this is Tucker on the Tucker Carlson network talking to Alexander Dugin, who is Putin's brain, the ideological center, where Dugin is talking about transgenderism and how they got there and this kind of thing. Just let's listen to this for a little bit.
Liberalism, as in my reading, it is a kind of historical and cultural and political and philosophical process of liberation of individual of any kind of collective identity, collective or that transcends individual. And that started with refuse of Catholic Church as collective identity, of empire, Western Empire as collective identity. After that, it was a revolt against a national state as collective identity in favor of purely civil society. After that, there was a big fight of the 20th century between liberalism, communism, and fascism, and liberalism has won once more.
Yes.
So, and after the fall of the Soviet Union, there was only liberalism, and Francis Fukuyama has pointed out correctly that there are no more any ideologies except of liberalism, and liberalism.
That's incorrect, but there are ideologies, and here he's talking about liberalism, the entire West, and he's trying to tie liberalism, that is saying that this democracy that we enjoy, the freedom, the autonomy of the individual is what is causing transgenderism. It's not necessarily so, but he's kind of tying this to Ukraine, although it's not really Ukraine. It's like all of Europe, all of America, and properly the individual should be prized as opposed to just a collective. And that's where you get like real Soviet-like or communist-like, where it's all about the collective over the individual. At any rate,
that was liberation of this individual from any kind of collective identity. There were only two collective identities to liberate from: gender identity, because it is collective identity. You are man or woman collectively, so you could not be alone.
But transgenderism doesn't. Individualism doesn't have to lead to transgenderism, although he leads Tucker down this path and Tucker doesn't correct him or like deal with why does it have to necessarily be so. Now, this is Dugin. Dugin's also the same guy who is Putin's brain, who also thinks that America is the devil and America must be destroyed and Russia must prevail and continue to grow because it's God's land on earth. But Tucker doesn't seem to mind interviewing him in spite of that. So that's who he's interviewing here. Now, again, there's two issues here. Also, Ukraine has embraced transgenderism. Now, let's talk about the Christianity side of this. This is interesting. The ISW has reported at length on Russia's efforts, not Ukraine's, Russia's efforts to persecute religious minorities, particularly Christian communities in occupied Ukraine as part of the Kremlin's wider occupation campaign. And yet, Tucker is saying nothing about what's going on with Russia persecuting Christians, although anytime that there's a whiff of anything, Ukraine might be doing that, where they have, for example, outlawed the Russian Orthodox Orthodox Church because the KGB was influencing it and doing that sort of thing. That doesn't affect at all the Ukrainian Orthodox Church or other denominations. It only affects those with it that are affected by the KGB in a time of war while there's military or martial law. Okay. But so he's not talking about that at all while this is clearly going on. Now, there's more to the story here. Russia is the least religious out of all the Orthodox nations, but he doesn't talk about that. So that's a real problem as well. In fact, Ukraine is almost 1.5 times as Christian as Hungary. 88% of the population is identifying as Christian. So when Tucker's talking about this nonsense of Ukraine is at war with Christianity, 88% of your population is Christian. Look at this. Here's Ukraine, 78% Orthodox, another 10% Catholic, another 7% unaffiliated, and then other, right? And even so, it's 88% between Orthodox and Catholic. And then here's Daniel Darling talking about it's completely and totally false. Ukraine has the largest concentration of even evangelicals in the region. It's often called the Bible Belt of Eastern Europe. The Ukrainian Baptist Theological Seminary has 2,000 students, led by the Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary alum. I am connected personally with Open Christian Open Academy, which is a college in Ukraine that is a Christian entity trying to educate in Ukraine. So I'll be giving a lecture later on this week. So I'm personally familiar with this kind of thing. What Tucker is saying here, that Ukraine's at war with Christianity, is absolute nonsense. Now, there's a little bit more to the story. Dugin, who you saw earlier interviewed, sees J.D. Vance and Tucker Carlson as Russian allies. Ben Shapiro, who's Orthodox Jewish, said this week after he interviewed Zelensky in Kyiv. Let's hear what he has to say.
Dugin counts. He said this in 97. On the help of the very isolationists, he said that Russia should foster, in that book, Foundations of Geopolitics. Among the people that he name checks in his new book are Tucker Carlson and J.D. Vance, his ideological allies. And Tucker is Dugin's ally here. I mean, there's just no question about this. Tucker literally had on Dugin last year on his show and praised him, and then refused to ask him a single question about Russia or Russian ambitions because that might burst the viewer's bubble.
Yeah, I mean, and when he had Dugin on his show, he was just kind of glossing over the fact of all the bad things that Russia was actually doing, just platforming Dugin to give his philosophies without recognizing the rest of the story. Okay, so there's also now, by the way, before I go and pivot a little bit, I want to say, if you know a conservative who doesn't support Ukraine, please pass this video on. Share this with your Republican friends who do not support Ukraine. This is Ben Shapiro giving his analysis after he interviewed Zelensky. So pass this video on, because he'll speak in a language that Republicans hear. When somebody on the left might say the same kind of thing, they won't hear it exactly. It'll be kind of a different accent than when you hear it from somebody of your ideological ilk, because Shapiro was making a pretty potent case that Russia is not America's friend, and showed how Dugin said so much. Okay, now I'm going to leave you with this last little bit. So over the past, this just came out just before I was going to video this. I was like, let me just see what else Tucker might have said. This was the very last tweet. Over the past years, countless American journalists have embedded with Zelensky's military. On the Russian side, there's only one, Patrick Lancaster. He's all in for Russia all the time, right? So let's interview him. Okay. And then he gets to this. So his final point is, why are Americans supporting this war? And now what Tucker Carlson does is position himself to ask, is this really true? Is it like, he'll just ask questions to kind of go, I didn't know that the Russians were so awesome and Ukraine was so bad. Like that's kind of how he does this. Let's hear what he has to say, and then we'll pivot to the last little bit.
Patrick, for taking all this time. Do you think the U.S. population, Americans, would have supported this war, which they've paid for over 3 years, as long as they did, if they'd had factual, unbiased news coverage of what was actually happening there?
The irony here is that what Tucker is bringing is not factual, unbiased news coverage. It's only half the story. He never shows the Ukrainian side, as I just did. And this is problematic, right? Because lots of people are leaning on him, thinking that he is one of them, right? Okay, let's hear just a little bit of what he has to say.
No, definitely not. And one reason is to go back to one of your previous questions about what's not being reported in the West that I could bring to light. Well, let's talk about the people of these areas, specifically the Donetsk and Lugansk areas, for the last 11 years, just wanting to break away from Ukraine and the right of self-determination.
Okay, let's say I just heard what he said. Hey, shouldn't they have the right of self-determination? Shouldn't the people of Ukraine have the right of self-determination from Russia as well? Like the people of the entire country, shouldn't they have the right of self-determination? I mean, if you're going to argue self-determination, it only seems fair, right? So that's a problem that I see here. But again, this is only one side of the picture. Okay, I'll leave you with this. This is a Tucker meme. Ice cream isn't dinner, says young Tucker. Ice cream isn't dinner, they say. Okay, well, why not? No one ever tells you because no one really knows. So what's this really all about? The answer is simple: power. Well, that's kind of how Tucker does this, right? All right. So when you see things like this, I don't want you to be unprepared or taken off guard that Ukraine is at war with Christianity. It's really not. Ukraine is a very traditional Orthodox Christian nation. Also, Ukraine has embraced transgenderism. Now, Tucker is he's only giving a very slanted view of what's happening in Ukraine. All right, my friends, put your comments in the comments below. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.